One of the new additions to the Queens Athletic Department in 2017 is a rugby program. Katie Wurst has been chosen to lead the team as the Director of Rugby Operations. She'll oversee the women's team as the head coach, and Frank McKinney will act as the head coach of the men's team. Both of you, welcome. Rugby, it's a bit of a different sport. It takes a different animal, a different personality to play it, kind of an adrenaline-driven sport. How'd you get into rugby, Katie?
My personal background is I was actually a basketball player and had competed in that sport as well as soccer, some softball as well, and a number of athletes are crossover sport athletes. But I was always that aggressive basketball player, the one that kind of pushed the edge, and rebounding was what I did well, so it just naturally transitioned over to the sport of rugby. You know, being able to constantly have the ball in hand and move to different edges of the field, and I just liked the aggression and I liked the intensity of the game.
What about for you, Frank? There was some soccer in your background?
Yeah, I was a big soccer player. I started playing soccer at age 5, all the way up to 18. And then when I went to undergrad, I was supposed to play soccer in college. I showed up to undergrad, and I didn't do the summer conditioning that I was supposed to do. So I went and had a conversation with the coach. He told me to go condition and come back. So I found the rugby guys around campus throwing the ball around. So I went out there, started throwing the ball around. And the first day I got the ball in hand, and I started running, and I was running through guys and over guys, and then I'd get hit, and I'd pop back up. And then afterwards, the guys were like, hey, we're going to go hang out at the cafeteria. And I just fell in love with the game first day. And I played in undergrad, and that set me up to where I am now.
What's the sport in the mainstream that rugby is the most similar to for the novice fan who is just becoming accustomed to the sport?
I guess the best answer would be a combination of all types of sports. So we have the aggression and physicality of American football. We have the speed of track and field, and we really have the grace of global games like soccer and basketball as well. So we're a combination of all types of different backgrounds and different areas of athleticism. For rugby players, it really is all shapes and sizes can compete in the sport. And we have conversations with some of our other coaches and, you know, who are you looking to recruit? And the conversations are anyone that is an athletic individual that can fit into a mold that works well in a team sport environment. So there's just a lot of different opportunities with our sport, which is why it's the fastest growing sport in America.
Frank, it's a sport that there's physicality to. You mentioned football, Katie. I played football. I've worn the pads back in high school, and it's a sport in which, well, when you're hit, you don't necessarily feel it all that much because the pads are there to absorb the pressure. Does rugby hurt the way it seems it hurts? Because you're getting hit from all sides, things are flying fast, and, well, it's just you kind of naked in a way out there.
Yeah, very good question. I think, you know, as you train during the week, you're taking hits during the week, so your body gets conditioned for taking those hits. And I think the hits you're taking in rugby, guys are coming in with their shoulders, they're wrapping up, and they're putting you to the ground. I think the difference in football is guys are looking for kill shots. They're looking for this big hit that's going to lay you out, and you're going to, you know, you're going to be, I don't know if you're hurt, but you're going to be laid out. In rugby, we're looking to put the person to the ground. There's still big hits, but the first and foremost, we want to put them to the ground, and then we've got to have the fitness to get back to our feet to contest for the ball. So the hits, they look like they hurt. But I think the more time you practice, the more time you're taking hits in practice, you take hits in games, you're really not feeling them. And plus your adrenaline's up too. So while your adrenaline's up, you're not feeling it. So you may feel it after the game later, but during the game, you're still able to go. You're still fine.
What about for you, Katie? Does the potential for injury concern you at all as a coach, someone who has taken it upon in your career to spread the game of rugby, part of why you're starting a program here, the potential for injury, does that concern you at all?
Well, we actually have, our injury rates are less than many full contact sports across the board, and that's a peer-based empirical evidence. Largely it's to do with the training programs that we have for coaches. So across the board in any sport, that injury rate decreases with the amount of training and education for the coaches. We're very fortunate here at Queens that we actually have that in our background. So being able to participate, I'm a coach educator with USA Rugby as well as World Rugby, and Frank has been through the coach certification process too. So that just statistically does reduce that injury rate, is learning and education to be able to do that. And in any sports, injuries is a reality for athletes. So my background's in sports psychology as well too. So the process of injury recovery and what you do at that time when you are injured. but most important is the difference between our sport and others. So some misconceptions go on about our game. In general, there are sports that are collision sports. We're an evasion sport. So when you think about big hits, the real point is to move to the space. So we even say, you're going to run at spaces, not faces. It's like a really easy thing we teach even younger athletes coming through the game. So the idea is to always move into the space and evade the contact. And then the contact that happens, you're prepared for it in terms of the training that you've received.
What's your message then to parents in the climate that we live in? And we live in a time in which the NFL, for example, is caught in legal issues over concussions and handling of players. What's your message then to parents? It's okay to send my kid to play rugby for you at Queens, and that isn't a problem.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a global sport, and it's one that has intensive training and education for coaches and educators. We're actually a global leader in terms of the World Rugby Spectrum for coach education, in terms of how we treat and approach things like the return to play protocol. So I think in every sport across the board, you look at soccer, basketball, other games, that is a reality, and we are at the forefront of learning and education. I actually just returned from the National Coaching Conference myself, where we presented on rugby, thinking of just presenting some of the work we've done in different avenues. So it's that constant education piece. It's learning, and one of the benefits for being here at Queen's University is just the top academic standards that we have and the different resources we have to work with our sports science department so that we're on the cutting edge of that information. So that just helps across the board to make the game safer and more of an option for athletes that are looking. Many athletes come from the crossover world that have experienced things like burnout from other games that they've been playing. So we provide an avenue for athletes to all get to touch the ball. Everyone gets to score, so it's a great opportunity that a number of athletes are picking up, which is exactly related to the growth of the game.
Can I add something with that? I think the other thing that's a big piece of our game is you have to wrap when you tackle. So you've got to come in shoulder and you've got to wrap. You can't lead with your head, can't lead with your arms. That's all a penalty. And we teach our kids, we spend a lot of time on correct types of tackling. In other sports, you see guys leading with their heads, you'll see guys leading with their arms to tackle, and we don't do that. And it's a lot safer to tackle somebody when you're coming in with a shoulder, you're wrapping, and you're looking to bring them down instead of running in for this big explosive hit that's going to lead to your head injuries, your neck injuries, forearm injuries. And I think that's what really separates rugby as a contact sport from other sports.
How do you then sell it to people that we're not just football without pads? We are a safer, different game. How do you sell that?
What's interesting is I have to, as coaching in college, I spend a lot of time talking to high school athletes. Some are rugby players, some are not, that are explosive athletes. And I think for me, I've spent many years playing the sport. I've seen the amount of head injuries that you get in other sports, and I've seen the few head injuries you get in rugby. And I think a lot of that goes back to coaching. I think a lot of that goes back to education. And like Katie was saying, we constantly are trying to learn to make sure we can cut down on any head injuries. But if you look at the statistics, you're going to see there's a lot less head injuries in rugby because we're not using helmets as a weapon. We're not going in to tackle, flying and lunging our body in with just our head. Our kids are going in shoulder first, they're going in and wrapping, and they're bringing them down. So by not using that head, right, that cuts down on the large amount of head injuries that you're going to have in sports.
Let's talk about the personality that it takes to play rugby. First off, for you, Frank, it's an adrenaline-driven sport, as we've been touching upon. I understand there was some kind of verbal spat you and some type of Christian brother got into on the rugby field. What did you do that forced this, and I guess it spilled over from the intensity of the game?
Yeah, so I was a high school coach at a local high school here, Myers Park High School, which is probably a mile from here, and we played in a regional championship. And in the regional championship, we were lucky enough to play against New Orleans Jesuit, and their head coach was not a priest. I think he was a brother, but he had a collar on. So if you're not Catholic, I'm actually Catholic, you probably wouldn't know that he wasn't a priest. We were down 10-0 at half. We came storming back and won 17-10. And it was. I mean, our kids stormed the field, and there was a lot of emotion afterwards. And as being a winning coach, I've been on both sides of that. So I went up to shake the brother's hand, and he gripped my hand, And I said, hey, good game. And he said, we didn't play that well. And I said, every day is a different day. And he said, he wanted to continue to have words about it. And I thought to myself, the last thing I want to do is get in a fight with a guy with a collar. I was trying to get away because I wanted to go talk to my kids and my parents. And he wanted to have a couple words with me about the game. So it's a funny footnote in my coaching career, but it was just conversation we had between the two. But, coaching, people get emotional. I always think the leader, the kids see what the coach, how his demeanor is. So if you're aggressive and excited and going crazy, then the kids are going to get excited and go crazy. So for me, I've always tried to stay calm. So in that situation, I let him have his words and grip my hand and tell me what he thought about the game. And I listened and I said, hey, good luck to you guys next season, and just thanked him for the game.
You're a pretty subdued fellow. It seems like that's the kind of attitude, in a way, though, this Christian brother that it takes to play this sport. For you, Katie, you seem this very gentle, delicate individual. When does the switch flip in your rugby career and you became this tough, intense, rugged player on the field? How does that happen?
Well, Phil, that's the first time I've been described as that, so I appreciate that. I think for me it really is, as Frank pointed out, the element of what rugby does is it teaches emotional control, which is one of the top mental skills that you can apply. So the idea of there's different elements that require really intense play, aggressive nature, and then it's a thinking person's game. It's a decision-making game, and which has always been something that I've been attracted to in terms of starting to play the sport, is thinking through, what are my options? How do I work with my teammates? So it teaches some of those elements. And as far as flipping the switch, and you mentioned just how do you sell the game sells itself. So when you watch it and you see the elements of it, there's, everything from speed-based, power, and really that part about it is a chess match. Oftentimes it's described as how that works. So the physical element of it is one part, and the other part is really that intellectual element of making decisions. And for me, the intensity just switches on when you get on the field. And you're there with your teammates. And as a coach, I've really translated to seeing the athletes get the most out of their potential. And that, translate also in what they're learning on the rugby field translates into the classroom and into their careers, as well as relationships in their families and everything else. So it just makes them good citizens across the board.
Let's talk building a program. There isn't a ton of high school rugby out there necessarily. The high school I went to didn't have a rugby team. Very few that I know of actually do. Where do you get players?
You want to take that first?
Sure. Well, I can tell you we actually just returned from the Girls National Invitational Tournament as well as the boys competition. So this has been a great weekend for us. And the number of collegiate scouts and programs that are growing across the country are definitely present and there. So, and with that is the standard every year rises of the high school game as well. And that's largely due to a huge increase of youth players. So one of our first signees, our first recruits, played 10 years of rugby. So, and that's her name's Abby Tobias. And having a player with that type of experience and just intellectual knowledge of the game paired with physicality, so we're seeing more and more athletes coming on board, trying that as an option, and they're starting it earlier in life as well. And you find them at tournaments like those, as well as different, national competitions, a big one, but there's the College Rugby Championship coming up in Philadelphia, has a really robust high school league as well too. So there's different pockets, and all of it is relationship building with high school coaches, and even looking at crossover sport athletes as well.
I know that wrestlers is something that you've told me about that you look at before, Frank.
So if you look, I've been fortunate enough to work with the wrestling coach here, Ken Schertow, who's an Olympian wrestler. And we sat down probably my first week here, and he said, hey, would you ever consider bringing wrestlers on to play rugby? And all of a sudden a big smile came across my face because, if you look, wrestling is a sport where I think players can easily transition into rugby. The CEO of USA Rugby not only has played for the U.S. national team in rugby, he was also a collegiate All-American in wrestling. So what's interesting is as I talk to other athletes that have played other sports, especially wrestling, I talk to them about that. And currently we've got one athlete who's signed up who's getting scholarship money for wrestling and for rugby. And we've probably got another 3 more in the pipeline. So wrestling is one of the sports that I look at that the athletes easily transition into rugby.
What about the competition? Who you'll play? The men's team will be a club team. The women are NCAA emerging. Break down for us the competition level, what schools you might play against, the conference you'll be in, because this is something that's off the radar and is classified a little bit differently than some of the other sports here at Queens.
Yeah, so I think that the big thing for us is we're going to be categorized by the school as a varsity sport. So with, I'm obviously a paid coach. We've got scholarship money. We have access to top facilities. So for us, we're going to be playing in the Southern Conference. The Southern Conference are going to be, local schools like UNCC and Elon, the Citadels in the Southern Conference, College of Charleston, Lander, UNCW, schools like that. So our first year to 2 years, we're gonna definitely play in that conference, and then depending on the level that we have, we may look for other options. But right now, as far as travel, getting the team going, building, we're gonna be playing the Southern Conference.
For the women, Katie?
Yes, as well. So we have an interesting opportunity as an NCAA emerging sport. So there's the National Intercollegiate Rugby Association, which is our goal. So with the unique aspect of being here at Queens is growing the program from a starting position. So we also have the opportunity to emerge as a strong Division II club competition for our first year and then transition into the ranks of the NCAA programs. As a NCAA Division II institution, we'll play against teams like Central Washington, Malloy College. As a club competition in the first year, there's actually been some movement in some of the other competitors that have long been in there, moving from Division II to Division I to Division I Elite. So with that shift means there's some really great opportunities for us to make an impact right away. So we'll be competing against teams like University of South Carolina, as well as Elon and UNC Charlotte. So a lot of the local Division II programs, and some of those within the southern region are really strong teams like Kennesaw State, Tulane, as well as Clemson. So those are some larger schools. Yeah. And the competition's a little bit different for rugby. It largely has to do with the strength of the coaching staff as well as the resources, and has it been a traditional fit? So the unique aspect of bringing rugby here to Queens is that they're interested in a vibrant team sport on campus, and that was their sole focus and purpose for that. Also, we have a pretty global international connection for our institution, and that fits very well with the global nature of the game of rugby. So those attributes make it very attractive to bring the sport to campus, and we get athletes every day that are current students that have maybe played other sports or have started to have an interest in rugby. So it'll be a mix of recruited student athletes and current student body.
As far as growing the sport, you specifically, Katie, you've spent 15 years in coaching. You've been at some big-name Division I institutions in terms of the mainstream NCAA classification. Colorado, Minnesota, Elon, South Carolina, the head coach there. What then brought you to Queens? Why pick this Division II school that's small in size, 2,400 kids, in the heart of Charlotte?
For one, it's the tradition of excellence in athletics across the board. So talking with all the athletic staff, the resources that we have here. So the ability to grant scholarship funding to individuals to play, to establish the teams that I have coached before were in that club sport environment where you maybe train 2 to 3 days a week, and largely the cost and the resources falls at the feet of the athletes. Here we have the opportunity to create that training environment on a regular daily basis, and they have access to working with strength and conditioning coaches. They have access to taking transportation to their matches versus having to carpool. So all of those things are different levels of competition that are looking to elevate the sport. So in my interest in coming to this institution is for the growth of women's rugby, which then also supports the growth of men's rugby as well. So it's also just about, same for recruited student athletes, it's about best fit, and this is best fit for me here. In terms of my academic reputation, I actually am completing my doctorate degree in kinesiology, so having that background was really important to me, that the strength of the academic programming was important as well for athletics. So it's a great mix of all of the things that I'm interested in my background to create an exceptional environment for the student athletes.
Where'd you meet Frank that you decided there's the guy who's going to be the men's head coach?
So it's actually a really great story. So I had been contacting Frank and really talking with him about doing some coach education. So and I work in a bunch of different fields. I work as a consultant as well in sports psychology, and we were working on a project to see how we could help give back to the game and grow the education. So I contacted Frank, and he, no questions asked, said, "I'm there. I'll help you. I'll be a part of this." So he came in to talk about leadership development and program development, and that was completely before we considered about this as an option. So just remembering that in my mind, that here's a person that's willing to step up and do anything to grow the community. So when I was called in for a meeting here to discuss options and opportunities at Queens for the growth of the rugby program as a whole, he was in the forefront of my mind. So I called up Frank, and it really is a rugby coach's dream to take this opportunity and across the country. And I just sort of had this conversation and said, Frank, you're really maybe not going to believe this, but this is the opportunity that we have and is afforded to us. So how about coming in for an interview? So he jumped at the opportunity right away, and then it just kind of went from there. So he came in and was very interested. And my interest is Frank's local connection. So he has long been a part as the high performance director here locally in the Carolinas region.
He's been in the backyard here.
So, and he just knows the community well here and has a long tradition of coaching in a high performance environment as well too, and having local connections is important. I have a lot more nationwide connections, just in terms of, as you mentioned, some of the different teams I've coached. I've worked as a coach educator for more than a decade through USA Rugby. So having that network of coaches that I've trained also is helpful. So we wanted to make that good pairing of local connections and national connections. And I just get along with them. Frank he's my best guy buddy, So getting to work with people that you really care about and have similar visions is important. And right away he's an athlete-centered coach. He is one that puts the athletes at first and foremost, what it is in everything that we do, and that really melds well with my philosophy as a coach as well.
What about your perspective of it? Because you've been in the area for a while, former team captain in college at Belmont Abbey, Charlotte Rugby Club for many years, head coach at Myers Park High School, in the backyard, as we mentioned. From your perspective, how did it go down? Yeah,
I'll be honest. I mean, one of the things people don't realize is that I would say 90 to 95% of rugby coaches in the U.S. are not full-time or are paid coaches. They're volunteer coaches. So I spent a lot of time driving high school stinky jerseys around. When I coached in college, I coached at the Citadel. We had people to wash jerseys, but it's still volunteer type thing. So for me, I mean, this is the dream job. I mean, it's truly a dream job to be able to bring athletes in, to give scholarship money, to play in top-notch facilities, to be able to speak with the athletic director, to be able to bring young men in here that are going to come and play rugby, the sport that I love. The other piece of this too is Katie and I have a really good relationship. We're outside of work, we're really good friends. I'll call her or text her if I have a big, something that happened that was really successful for recruiting. And I'll call her when it's bad news too. If it's rain or shine, we talk on the phone, we text. And I think that's really important because we spend a lot of time together. Our offices are right next to each other. We're in meetings together. If I can't make a meeting, she'll be there. If she can't make it, I'll be there. And we really kind of look out for each other. And that's really important. And I think what's the other interesting caveat for me, this school, right? I'm a big business major. I've got an MBA. They have a great business school. They have good academics, really good academics here. So to be able to put a program together that'll have, a high level of rugby with a good education is easy for me to sell. It's really easy for me to sell. The campus is beautiful. And we've got somebody that's on our staff that's worked for USA Rugby, that's been a high-level player and a really good coach. Broadcaster and a really good coach. So packaging that up, going out and selling that, telling kids, hey, this is why you got to come to Queens, it's a dream for me.
How tough was the interview? Because I know that Katie has some interview skills. Was it, oh, come be my friend, or did she grill you in the interview?
Yeah, so she actually how things happen there pretty fast. So Sherry, who's the athletic director, Swarthout, who's the athletic director, called me on a Monday, and Katie had called me beforehand and said, hey, they're probably going to be calling you. And on Monday she gave me a phone interview. On Tuesday I came in and actually had a face-to-face interview with Sherry, James Bullock, and also the dean of students here, who's also an avid rugby player, John Downey. I had a face-to-face interview with them Wednesday. It was actually I think it was Ash Wednesday. I think was the night. There was a basketball game going on, and Sherry called me and actually made the offer to me. And to be honest, I almost fell out of the car when she made the offer, because being a full-time paid coach is, I mean, it's really a unicorn in rugby. So I accepted the offer on Wednesday. I filled out my paperwork Thursday. I picked up 2 Queens Rugby shirts on Friday, And literally that Saturday, I was out recruiting out in Charlotte at a rugby tournament. So that's the whirlwind tour of how I ended up here.
Both of you are breaking barriers in the process. Katie, the only female director of rugby in the country, and Frank, as far as we know, the only African-American men's coach in the country. In the process of coming here, did that at all cross your mind?
I think it's a process of our game is really focused on diversity and inclusion. So we are all shapes and sizes, all backgrounds, any type of cultural variation or identifier, that's what we bring and provide. So it only makes sense as well too. And also have, Sherry Swartout, a female athletic director as well. So we love that we're pioneering in different avenues of the sport. So of course, it's something that we look at to make it an open and inclusive, inviting environment for all types of individuals. And it fits well with that campus culture as well, too.
For you, Frank?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of an interesting question. I don't ever think of myself as one of the only African-American rugby coaches in the game. To me, I take a lot of pride in that because I'd like to see more coaches, and I think the game on the men's side has really evolved. You see a lot more African Americans playing rugby than you did when I played. When I played, if you saw another African American on the field on the other side, you were like buddies. Hey, now you see African Americans everywhere playing rugby, and at very high levels. And some of the most decorated rugby players in the country are African Americans. So the game has totally changed. But for me, I don't see that. And what I think is interesting about Katie and her position, I think she's good no matter if she was a man, a woman, black, white, whatever. She's good. I mean, I don't put a label on it. She's good. So for me, I'm constantly working to try to be a better coach. For me, I don't really put the label that I'm one of the only African American coaches in the country, but I also do take some responsibility in making sure that I hold that to a high standard.
Well, I enjoyed this. Learned a lot today, both of you. All the best of luck with the program.
Thank you
Katie,
so much,
Frank.
Phil.
Yep,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.